Fantastic. Okay, while our speakers are coming up, let me just say a few words about them as they come up. We have Nahida Zayed. She's a seasoned prosecutor. She's worked with the Department of Justice to teach cultural awareness and law enforcement. She's top ranking in her field. She's wearing the white and black outfit over there. And Ra'ad Masri, he's a serial entrepreneur, VC investor, and expert and speaker. Manal Fakhouri, CEO of Fakhouri Leadership, three-time TEDx speaker. She's making an awesome impact with her leadership, speaking, serving on multiple boards. And Rania Hotet, an multiple award-winning serial entrepreneur, global impact leader, and recognized by the White House and the UK Parliament. Please check them all out on LinkedIn, connect with them. My few sentences does not do justice to the great work that they're all doing. Welcome, everybody. Give them a round of applause. Okay, I'm very excited because we're going to be talking about leadership today. And maybe if we have time, we'll do some Q&A. But I would love to just start and ask everybody, you know, we went through a crazy 2.5 years with COVID, the pandemic, even like racial injustice in the US, and it took a big toll on leaders. They really had to step up and they really had to motivate and empower their team. So what I would love to start with is to ask each one of you, what did you do in those situations as a leader? How did you motivate your team, keep them empowered, and really make sure that they stay engaged? Let's start with you, Raed.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. Listen, first of all, a little bit about myself. I'm Palardonian, Pali-Ordonian, for those who didn't know, from Canada, and I've been a serial entrepreneur. And having been a serial entrepreneur with 3 miserable failures and luckily with 2 20x outcomes, I had to go through many experiences such as this one. And I found that oftentimes it's just focusing on the goal, leading by example, and cutting the BS, really, just sitting down and trying to hash things out, figuring out what's the problem, what needs, where you are today, making that assessment. Don't overdo it, don't be overcritical, just truly understand where you are, understand where you want to be, and build a plan. And usually rallying everyone's mind around that objective and the goal is the way to go.
Fantastic. Manal.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So to the question regarding, I think it's interesting, I've often reflected on not everyone comes on earth and gets to experience a pandemic. And to have the experience and the leadership to take your team through that. And I think even now, you know, we've moved from integration to really now to move back into excellence. Because there's still companies that are still trying to figure out how to bring back their workforce. You have what we call the quiet quitters. You have the quiet firing. And within leadership, I think when I look at the 2 things that are most important for me in this context, it's communication and leadership. So both tracks, you know, carry a lot of weight. And with leadership, I think what's important to remember and what has worked for me with a lot of the people that I lead is something that I call lateral leadership. And it's understanding and using terms like you're the lead for this portion of the project. And so when we meet, it's not for you to listen to me telling everyone what to do, but I'm waiting for you to report back to all of us on the team what progress you're making and where you need help. And I think that works really beautifully, and I'll give a quick example. I've had one team member on my team now for 5 years, and we'll use TEDx because I'm a curator also. And she was one of those really, you know, dormant members, and you ask yourself, like, what value is she really bringing? And then as a leader, you have to ask yourself, have I placed her in a position where she can blossom? So this year, 5 years later, she's my strongest team member. And I love that. I love witnessing, you know, nurturing someone, allowing them to grow right alongside of you, and then for them to become one of your most powerful leaders. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nahida.
So for those of you who don't know me, I am a prosecutor. My name is Nahida Zayed Hussein. And I've been a prosecutor going on for 17 years. And during the pandemic, I found myself feeling isolated. I'm in a profession where every day I meet with people in person. Every day I meet with my victims. Every day I meet with the witnesses, the lawyers, and the judges, my partners, all my colleagues, my secretaries, in every group that I was part of and that I am part of, in our employee resource groups and our internal groups, there was a struggle to find a connection during the pandemic. And I felt the pandemic gave us a chance virtually to try to reach out to each other. And through our virtual, whether it was through Zoom or whether it was through FaceTime, I made it a mission to show other people not to feel that isolation, that feeling that you were alone during the pandemic. But through that, I felt there was a growth. We grew because I learned that that dialogue, that open communication we talk about, helped others feel like they were not alone, but also gave this open forum for us to discuss what we were really feeling, what we were going through, and what we wanted to see happen either in the workforce or in our personal growth. And because we had that dialogue, there was a connection. We grew personally, we grew professionally, we grew together. And as a leader in my professional life and in my personal life, I'm one of 5 siblings in a huge family, as many of you probably are. It became part of who I was. And earlier we talked about taking and adopting who we are and being open and about who we are to others and feeling unapologetic about that. That's something that grew through the pandemic. And as a leader, I shown everyone that that is a strength we all carry as Arabs, as Muslims, as non-Muslims, as any ethnicity, every religion. Take that. That is your strength. You carry that as a badge of honor. And that is going to be a leadership skill we all carry. We just, as soon as we absorb it and use it, it is a power struggle for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rania.
Hi, everyone. For us, particularly, because I was running a global technology company, we had people distributed in 11 cities around the world. We had clients in over 25 countries. We had major challenges that we were faced with. And being in the industrial sector, it was one of the sectors that was disrupted the most during the pandemic. So for me, as a leader of a large team that was over 350 people, it was a major challenge that I had to accept in terms of finding new purpose, new meaning for the team, new meaning and purpose for our clients and the companies that we work with, and also finding ways for me to act in much more agile leadership styles that would help me to adapt very quickly to the changes that we're going through internally as a company, and also in our exchanges and interactions with the clients that we were working with, because we had so many clients that were on the verge of shutting down their businesses. And we found an opportunity. If we want to survive, we also have to help our clients survive. And being in the manufacturing and industrial space and in the tech space, we had major advantage in terms of how can we intervene to help accelerate the production of essential products that were critical for usage during the pandemic. And we use our capabilities, our networks, the technologies that we develop internally to help our clients adapt and adjust and run new types of production lines and processes so they can accommodate increasing needs of medical products. And that was a new purpose that we found during the pandemic that helped us to contribute in major ways to the growth and the sustainability of our clients, to the growth and sustainability of our own company, and also to contribute from a social impact perspective where we were able to do something that was meaningful and helpful during a crisis. So that's how we handled it.
Yeah, fantastic. What I'm hearing is a common denominator of purpose, communication, connection. So what I would love to know, leadership has changed a lot over the last decade. So for today's leaders, what do you think are some of the top qualities that are really important to embody as a leader? Right, Ed, we'll start with you. You're the first again.
Well, perhaps we should allow my esteemed colleagues to start.
Okay, sure. I'll be quick. So as far as qualities that you're asking us more, I think there's a couple of things. One is I love this survey that was done. This was done years ago. It was Fortune magazine asked the question, why do CEOs fail? And the number one answer was Lack of vision. But it wasn't lack of vision. That was the number one answer. It was lack of action. So I think you must be action driven because there's lots of great ideas, but if you don't follow through, you're not going to get things done. The other thing that I teach with my leadership students, and by the way, what I love and the most impactful work that I've done is in the prisons, is that of increasing your own personal initiative. You know, people don't give you initiative, you get it yourself. And I love when I notice, when someone notices that a document is sloppy and they update it and they put your logo on it and then they present it to you and you didn't ask them to do that. That's just a small example. So I think for me, it's action. It's also education, so you want to invest and there's new things and there's better ways to do things. So for example, we talk about best practices. Well, it's no longer best practices, it's leading practices. So I would just say, you know, make sure you're aware and, you know, continue to invest in yourself, take action, and increase your personal initiative.
So I work for the second largest prosecuting agency in the country, and we have a very high intense, high risk, daily ongoing business. Every day, we're in litigation, you get a case, you ultimately run the risk, either you're gonna win or you're gonna lose. Not everyone tries every case from beginning of employment, right? So there's going to be that first case. There's going to be that high intense case where you potentially will lose, someone's gonna be upset, you're gonna feel like you let down the firm. So as a leader, I take it upon myself to communicate as much as possible. I was in that position. When I started with the office, before trying my first case, I was presented with one and said, you want to do it? Of course. I wanted to show initiative. I said, sure, but I've never tried it before. So I knew the intensity. I knew those feelings, and they were profound. So when I had those discussions, when I have those discussions on a daily basis with people who have not had that experience or are going through that experience, that communication builds trust. It also builds confidence. And through that, there's this mentor-mentee mentality that we developed. And when you do that, you develop leaders. You as a leader develop leaders. They then learn to communicate, and you develop more. So that productivity in such a large firm that I'm established in has now made it's a culture. And it's something that we need to adapt in every type of profession. And whatever you do, wherever you are, it doesn't matter if you're what I'm doing, whatever you do, if you do that, communicate, empathize with somebody, and let them know that what they're feeling, you felt it before, and understand that will develop into cultivating a really productive environment.
To go back to traits, I want to mention a few things from experience and also from really observing a lot of leaders in different industries. There is so much emphasis on traits that are superficial. When we associate leadership with charisma, with strength, with exuberance, with enthusiasm, with passion. And although all these traits are important, they do not necessarily equate to great leadership. I believe that there are much deeper attributes that we need to cultivate, and we need to also investigate in individuals that show up in certain ways before we exemplify them as role models. We need to look at their capabilities to transform themselves, to transform other people. Because like you mentioned, and also in resonance to what you said as well, the element that's really, really critical is, are you capable of driving results? Are you capable of helping your team and your organization drive results? And to drive results, you need to put massive action behind that, and you have to have so much initiative, not only as an individual leader who is leading others that are following, but also to instill that same motivation and that same passion and make them experience it for themselves so they are driven to act like individual leaders within a larger organization and ultimately contribute to the growth at an individual level and also at an organizational level.
Great.
Yeah, I loved what the ladies had to say, Manal, thank you. And you know, my coach always said action is the difference between dreaming and accomplishing your goals. And often he also says, he's kind of my source of wisdom here, he goes, it's not how hard you work, it's how hard you work to prepare to get to your goals. So if if your goal is to get in shape, well, it's not how hard you push or how much you carry, it's how you prepare your meals in advance so that you're not having to eat junk, or how you allocate that time in your calendar so that you're not having meetings at the time you're supposed to be doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And that stuff happens a week in advance of actually doing those things. So it's preparation combined with action.
I love that. So what I'm hearing is a lot of personal leadership, right? In order to coach and cultivate in others, you have to coach and cultivate in yourself. So we talk a lot today with leadership in regards to empathy, vulnerability, being relatable as a leader, which I know has been a challenge for myself sometimes. So I'd love to touch upon that with the panel and ask you, in regards to personal leadership, what's one area for yourself that you see is still maybe a blind spot that you're working on, that you're cultivating as a leader? For myself, it's empathy, right? Sometimes when you're more high functioning, you see things a certain way, you think everybody's gonna do it that same way. So I'd love to see for you what that is that you're still working through.
I think one of the greatest things that I struggle with till today, it comes from my upbringing. I'm guilt-driven a lot of times, and when you do something, you tend to start thinking, did I do that right? Did I say that right? Did that person take that incorrectly? Did I offend someone? It kind of comes from the culture too, like, yeah, you say it, what did I do? What did I say? But I say things sometimes confidently because I want to promote, some kind of productivity in whatever I'm doing, right? But sometimes it can come off pretty harsh. And as a leader, you have to show that strength, because through that you're setting the standard. And so I think one thing I do as a leader is I do constantly think about how it's being received. You have to know your audience, but that's not necessarily a negative either, because I'm constantly making sure that what I'm saying is being communicated and received appropriately and in the way that I want it to be. So it could falter in some regard because it could be taken wrong, but it's not a bad thing to constantly care about how it's being received. That communication, we want to be strong, we want to communicate, but we should also empathize and think about how it's being received.
One area for me personally that I prioritize to deliver on is individualist consideration, which is me putting a lot of time into mentoring my team members one-on-one and being able to harness their capacity at an individual level, and also being able to tune into their needs and help them, each one, to be able to cater to them in a much more customized leadership style. And that's a very challenging area to do, because for me it's very important to put empathy at the forefront. It's very important to help the individual grow within the organization. So there is a self-development aspect that's very important to me to instill. I still find it, although I do put so much effort in that area, I still feel guilty that maybe I can do more, or I can be more available to people at an individual level. And that's very hard when you're leading larger corporations and larger teams and you have so many initiatives. But that for me is an area that's important, and I'm always trying to self-develop to make myself more available in those ways.
Raed.
Yeah, thank you. So as a VC, we get approached all the time by various entrepreneurs, oftentimes with what appears like super crazy ideas. So one skill set I've been trying to work on myself on is just not be dismissive. And anytime a light bulb pops up and says, this guy is crazy, I try to just put that away. No, let me listen to the end. And it has happened more than once where by the end of the meeting, I was quite impressed, and we've made a few investments as a result. So.
Manal.
So this is a kind of unusual answer, but when I was in high school and I used to play basketball, I used to notice that a lot of times people would not throw the ball to me when I was in practice. I was a point guard. But then during the game, when it was really key, then I would get the ball. I couldn't even truly, it's why are you passing it to me? So what's interesting with leadership, and what I struggle with as a leader, is sometimes, if I'm chairing an event and I'm working an event and people are excited and when we're getting things done, and then sometimes I have to play that role of being on a committee and just really stepping back. So it's the stepping forward, stepping back role. So you want someone else to take the lead. So then so people look at you like, well, why isn't she doing as much as she usually does? Is she not interested in our group? And it's really interesting because sometimes you feel like you're trying to give somebody else that opportunity to take the lead. And if you're the one taking the lead, then it's like, you're almost overperforming, and people don't like that either. So there's a fine tune that you have to create to make sure that you're leading in a positive way.
Yeah, I love that. So Rania, you mentioned earlier, I love how you were talking about leadership, and sometimes it can be very surfacey, right? Like we focus on the outside things that leaders do, but really it's a lot more challenging and difficult to exercise them in real time. So I would love to hear some tangible strategies and tips that you use as a leaders to grow yourself, things that actually create transformation. So not just saying, I'm going to work on my empathy or active listening, but what are the actual tools that you do that you see help you? I have a coach, for example. I coach as a company, and then I also have a coach because that creates more transformation in me. So I would love to know what your tools are.
I can go ahead. For me, I actually do take a lot of feedback from my team members. So I kind of flip the roles where I put them in the CEO shoes, and I tell them to give me their feedback. How can I be better? How can I serve you better? What are the areas that you think I can be a better leader for you? And I make it a very open conversation where I'm willing to take as much criticism as possible and really channel that into actions where I kind of take the most common feedback and then build strategies on, okay, here, this is gonna be a priority now because there is a majority of the team that has the same concern, and I will start developing in that particular area that way. So I find it a useful tool. I make them coach me as much as I coach them, but I believe if you want to be effective in your particular relationship to a certain team or partner or any other individual you're interacting with, the best coach is going to be your mirror. Is that person in front of you telling you, this is what I need, this is what's missing, this is how you can make our relationship better. And that's how we do it in our personal life as well. So I treat it this way.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That's beautiful. There's an Arabic saying, al-aql salim fil jism salim, or the right mind in the right body. So I find that I resort to that, to doing sports, doing activities, going cycling. During my cycling is where I actually listen to all the books that I'm supposed to be reading, 9 to 5. Turned out to be a great hobby. And as a result, I'm growing every time I exercise. And at the same time, that helps me come up with new ideas. So often people say meditation. Well, that has not worked for me. My meditation is my exercise. Chase your whatever your thing that helps you relax and not be under the pressure to constantly perform. Because this break is the time to recoup and rebuild.
So I belong to a Toastmasters organization, which is a communication organization. And we had to develop, or I decided to really be quick and have this intro that I could use over and over again whenever I was going to come in to give a speech and I was late. I just hand the Toastmaster my introduction. And it was that I am a personal development addict. And I really mean that. Like my husband and I so the tools that we use, we're members with the Tony Robbins program. We attend all his programs and have learned so much. The other thing that I would recommend, also even like, let's say an organization such as Rotary. So what I find is that I'm attracted to excellent speakers, and I'm usually aware of the information, the style of what they're teaching. So it's an investment. And years ago, and some of the things that we teach is, hey, you should be investing 5% of your income on your personal development. And back to communication, people will equate your intelligence to how effective you are as a communicator. So it is definitely worth investing in all of that. But yes, so my tools are just continually growing, reading, and attending leadership conferences and helping others learn.
So as a leader, we could have our low points. We're not always that energetic, can-do attitude. We hold the results on our shoulders. Sometimes we fail, and we take that home, and got to learn how to deal with that. Because I'm in criminal law and I prosecute murders, I take that home if I win, if I lose a case, what the sentence is. And I had to learn how to deal with that, to be a better leader so I can effectively show how to do this work. You have to show you're doing it, right? So when I do a lot of things. One thing, I meditate at home, I pray a lot. I do have a can-do attitude, but because I carry that, I find different therapeutic measures. So I'm gonna just put this out there. I'm a big advocate for mental health. It's not wrong to recognize that we all carry those burdens of thoughts where we hold it against ourselves or others, because we all have that negativity. It's gonna drive us in one direction or the other. But you gotta recognize it. And I think one of the best things that I've done so far is I've been honest with myself, and I've been honest with everyone I know, whether it'll be my colleagues or my own family. Grew up, I'm the oldest daughter, and it was always very censored what you can say, right? Like, you shouldn't say those words. But as I grew up, I learned that I should say those words. I'll say them respectfully, but my emotions are honesty. And what I feel is the truth. And the truth is never wrong. So if the truth is never wrong, those words should always be spoken. And that was my therapy. So if I took home a loss and I was carrying that, I was honest about how I felt. And when I was honest about how I felt, those emotions were real, and I was allowed to feel those emotions. So that's therapy for ourselves, but because I did that, I was able to go the next day and feel stronger and do the next case and show my team, show my partners. We carry that, we learn from it, we move on. That's a leader, that's a true leader, to show that it's okay to feel those feelings and learn from them and move on. You're showing that we're all human, right? So it's okay to do that. I think our mental health is our biggest thing, and I think that's been my driving force and how I'm able to show this leadership grows in the way we present it, right? So I think that's been my biggest, honestly, therapy in life.
And thank you for sharing that, because it's a really critical and important topic as well. Over the past couple years, more and more we're seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion gain some major traction, and it's progressing and it's not going anywhere. And as we know, we fall under diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging. I'm curious to know, as an Arab American and Canadian, have you had any challenge because of who you are and your race and ethnicity, and how did you deal with that as an Arab American entrepreneur, leader, investor? What was that like for you? How did you overcome it? Raed, let's start with you this time.
My quick answer is no. I never like to be the victim. Any challenges I've faced in my life are a result of life. As an entrepreneur, you're bound to have new ideas that some people will believe in, others will not. You just got to stay focused, do what you need to do, and the results will speak for themselves. That being said, as an investor, we do have the affinity to our community and other overlooked and often dismissed entrepreneurs from diverse communities and networks, starting with our very own. And our goal, as you saw during Rama's keynote, is to nurture, invest, and support 1,000 tech founders so that each of them would impact 1 billion and make 1 billion.
Okay, if I understood the question, it's about the diversity and inclusion and us feeling if we have ever had resistance?
Correct.
Okay, so excellent question. So growing up, I don't think initially, and I will say when we immigrated to LA, and it was the city of angels, and I didn't feel, the discrimination. I really felt welcomed as a young kid. And growing up and now living in Florida and in my city, and a year ago I ran for mayor for the city of Ocala, very deep red community. And it was interesting because I had the name recognition, I had all the things that you would need, and if you look historically, I was supposed to win that race. But where I felt the pushback is that I was Muslim, that I was Middle Eastern, that I just, that is where you feel that as you could serve your community, you can be on all these boards, you can be the person that they come to help fundraise. But when it came time to represent, then all of a sudden there was suspicion. So that would probably be, have I felt it? And I agree with you. And I think that's where DEI has really come, we birthed it, knowing that we need to have inclusion is universal. Everybody wants to be included, everybody wants to be welcomed, everybody wants to be thanked. So yes.
And representation as well. Yeah, definitely.
So I am from Illinois, most specifically grew up in Chicago, and right outside of Chicago we have the greatest number of Palestinians living right outside of Chicago. I'm in the Little Palestine, Little Palestine, and then in the Bridgeview area. Growing up, although I never felt like my culture was not recognized, that diversity and inclusion. I learned it in my career. In law, I felt we were minimal. I felt like I was non-existent. And even until today, I kind of felt that way. I'll tell you, it wasn't until I started being open about who I was and discussing with my colleagues my background. I mean, even it particularly became a real issue when I started in our process in getting married. And my friends were really interested in learning, well, you don't date, how are you gonna meet somebody? And learning our culture, and learning our religion, and learning the ceremonies. And they really were interested. It was the first time I started to realize this was not something I should hide. It opened the dialogue, and people started appreciating who I was and my differences. Instead of me hiding it, I was honestly telling people about what it is I was doing at home when they were just, hanging out. And it became something, I really wanted this to become a platform here. So we started actually Amina Employee Resource Group with the State's Attorney's Office. And they're the ones who sponsored us to come out here today for Arab American Foundation, so a little shout out. But I basically say, if you feel at all, like this is what I felt. I felt that was my challenge in my workforce. That's where I needed to show it. And the way we did it is we started a group. And whenever we do the work in the Arab American community, we let the office know, we let our colleagues know, come join us. The support is endless. You just need to show that it's okay. Let people know the diversity. And if you feel it's minimal, you're the one who should start it. We all have the potential.
I had a bit of a different type of experience being an Arab woman, young immigrant that came to the States. I migrated from Lebanon at the age of 18. I came here alone. I only had $1,000 in my pocket. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I didn't have a support system. So when I first came to the country, I was kind of faced with different types of stereotyping issues that ranged from race to gender to other types of stereotypes that are kind of more associated with roles and jobs and in society. So it was, I would say the beginnings were pretty challenging because I had difficult experiences in college. I had lots of adversaries for some reason, although I do not instigate any conflicts. But I was always in that position where I felt like I am being kind of challenged or I'm kind of being systematically kind of isolated because I'm an Arab or I'm a female or I'm entering a highly male-dominated space. Those things started to slowly dissolve and become more minimal as I started to become more successful. So I had to really push through all types of challenges and stereotypes and situations with colleagues and investors and business associates and potential clients. And it was difficult. I wouldn't say it was easy for me, but I had to persevere through it because I wanted to achieve my goals. I wanted to build something. And I had, honestly, no other choice. I didn't have a plan B to fall on. So if I was to fail, I was going to really just... it wasn't going to be good at all. So I had no option but to succeed, and I think that was the main driver for me. And eventually, when people start to see you kind of carving your own path and succeeding and growing in measures that they didn't necessarily imagine for themselves, let alone imagine it for you, all these different elements become kind of non-existent because you now gain respect from a different perspective, and it's hard for people to want to minimize you because you're female or because you're an Arab or because you're Muslim or black or white or whatever. Those things start to kind of fade away, and if they have something against you, they're going to have to hold it for themselves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for your amazing guidance and leadership. Please take the opportunity to meet your speakers out and about. We are all hanging out. Thank you again so much, everybody.